Beneath the veneer of the ordinary world, where time marches forward in measured steps and the boundaries of reality seem fixed, there exists a hidden current, an ancient river of wisdom that has flowed through the ages, whispered only by those daring enough to listen. Among the few who have waded into its depths, none have stirred its waters quite like Paracelsus, the enigmatic alchemist whose name alone conjures images of secret laboratories, cryptic manuscripts, and the elusive philosopher's stone. His teachings, veiled in allegory and guarded by the ages, were not merely instructions for transmuting lead into gold, but keys to unlocking the very fabric of existence. To speak of Paracelsus is to speak of forbidden knowledge, of truths so potent they were deemed too dangerous for the uninitiated, too luminous for eyes accustomed only to shadows. The philosopher's stone, that fabled substance said to grant eternal life and infinite wealth, was never merely a physical object. It was, in Paracelsus's vision, a metaphor for the alchemist's own transformation, a mirror held up to the soul, reflecting the journey from base ignorance to enlightened mastery. The stone was not found in the crucible alone, but in the crucible of the self, where the raw materials of human experience, suffering, curiosity, and the relentless pursuit of truth were subjected to the fires of purification. To discover it was to undergo a metamorphosis so profound that the seeker ceased to be a mere mortal and became, in essence, a co-creator with the divine. Paracelsus walked the razor's edge between science and mysticism, his work a bridge between the seen and unseen. He spoke of the prima materia, the primordial chaos from which all things arise, and the quintessence, the fifth element that permeates and animates the cosmos. His forbidden teachings were not just formulas for elixirs, but maps of consciousness, guiding the aspirant through the labyrinth of illusion toward the center where matter and spirit converge. To study his work is to embark on a voyage not only through the history of alchemy, but through the hidden corridors of one's own mind, where every symbol, every arcane phrase, becomes a doorway to revelation. Yet why were these teachings forbidden? Why did they linger in the shadows, passed in hushed tones from master to disciple? The answer lies in their power, the power to dissolve the illusions that bind humanity to suffering, to reveal the underlying unity of all things, and to awaken the dormant forces within the human soul. Such knowledge, in the wrong hands, could unravel the very structures of society, which thrive on separation and control. Paracelsus knew this, and so he cloaked his wisdom in layers of symbolism, ensuring that only those with the eyes to see could decipher its meaning. His words were seeds planted in the fertile soil of the prepared mind, destined to bloom only when the seeker was ready to receive them. To explore the forbidden teachings of Paracelsus is to step into a world where the boundaries between science, philosophy, and spirituality blur into insignificance. It is to recognize that the quest for the philosopher's stone is not a relic of a superstitious past, but a living, breathing journey that continues to this day. A journey that calls to those who sense there is more to existence than meets the eye. The stone is not merely a thing to be found, but a state of being to be attained, a fusion of the highest aspirations of the mind and the deepest yearnings of the heart. As we begin this exploration, let us cast aside the notion that alchemy is a dead art, a curiosity of history. Instead, let us see it for what it truly is, a timeless path of transformation, a sacred science that speaks to the eternal within us. The forbidden teachings of Paracelsus are not locked away in some distant past. They are alive, waiting to be rediscovered by those who dare to seek. The philosopher's stone, in all its radiant mystery, is not lost. It is merely hidden, waiting for the moment when the seeker becomes the sought, when the alchemist and the stone are revealed as one and the same. To step into the mind of Paracelsus is to enter a realm where the material and the mystical are not opposing forces, but intertwined threads of a grand cosmic tapestry. His teachings, though draped in the language of alchemy, transcend the mere manipulation of substances. They are a philosophy of wholeness, a call to recognize the divine spark hidden within the dross of the mundane. At the heart of his work lies the conviction that the universe is alive, a vast organism pulsing with hidden correspondences, where every herb, mineral, and celestial body echoes a deeper, unseen order. The Philosopher's Stone, then, is not just an alchemical triumph, but the revelation of this living harmony, the moment when the seeker awakens to the truth that separation is illusion, and all things are bound by an invisible fire. One of the foundational pillars of Paracelsus's thought is the doctrine of signatures, the belief that nature herself provides clues to the hidden properties of things through their shapes, colors, and patterns. A plant with heart-shaped leaves, for instance, might heal ailments of the heart. A mineral veined with gold could hold the key to unlocking spiritual wealth. This was not mere superstition, but an intuitive grasp of the symbolic language of creation, a way of reading the world as one might decipher an ancient manuscript. For Paracelsus, the entire cosmos was a book written by the hand of God, and the alchemist's task was to learn its alphabet. To seek the Philosopher's Stone was, in essence, to become literate in this divine script, to see beyond the surface of things into their essential nature. Yet knowledge alone was not enough. Paracelsus insisted that true alchemy required an inner purification, a burning away of the ego's dross so that the higher self could emerge. He spoke of the solve et coagula, the alchemical dictum to dissolve and coagulate, not just as a laboratory technique, but as a spiritual discipline. The seeker had to dissolve the rigid structures of conditioned thought, the false identities and attachments that clouded perception, and then reconstitute themselves in alignment with the universal will. This was the real meaning of transmutation. Not turning lead into gold, but fear into wisdom, ignorance into illumination. The crucible was as much the human soul as it was the alchemist's flask. Another radical departure in Paracelsus's thought was his rejection of blind adherence to ancient authorities. He famously burned the works of Avicenna and Galen in a public defiance of dogma, declaring that true knowledge came not from books, but from direct engagement with nature and the inner light of intuition. This was heresy in an age when scholarship meant regurgitating the wisdom of the past, but Paracelsus understood that tradition, when unchallenged, becomes a prison. His teachings thus carry a rebellious undercurrent, a call to question, experiment, and trust one's own experience. The Philosopher's Stone could never be found by following another's map. It demanded a personal journey, a confrontation with the unknown. Underlying all these ideas was Paracelsus's concept of the archeus, a vital force that governed the processes of life and transformation. Unlike the mechanistic views that would later dominate science, he saw the universe as animated by an intelligent energy, a subtle fire that shaped matter from within. The alchemist's role was to work in harmony with this force, to become a conscious participant in the unfolding of creation. In this light, the Philosopher's Stone was not an external trophy, but the awakening of the archeus within, the moment when the individual will aligned with the cosmic will, and the alchemist became a true magus, a master of the hidden arts. These themes, signatures, inner purification, experiential knowledge, and the living intelligence of nature, form the bedrock of Paracelsus's Forbidden Teachings. They reveal alchemy not as a primitive precursor to chemistry, but as a holistic science of transformation, one that unites the outer and inner, the visible and invisible. To engage with them is to step onto a path where every experiment, every failure, every moment of doubt becomes part of the alchemical process, each a necessary stage in the soul's journey toward the stone. To truly grasp the forbidden teachings of Paracelsus, one must learn to read the world as he did, not merely with the eyes of logic, but with the soul's intuition, attuned to the whispers of symbols and the hidden dramas unfolding beneath the surface of things. His writings are not straightforward manuals, but layered mythologies, where metals breathe, planets govern human destinies, and the quest for the Philosopher's Stone becomes an epic of self-discovery. These are not fictions in the ordinary sense, but living allegories, mirrors held up to the mysteries of existence itself. Consider, for instance, the alchemical wedding, the sacred marriage of sun and moon, gold and silver, king and queen. On the surface, it appears as a fantastical tableau, a shimmering vision of celestial romance. But for Paracelsus, this union was the very pattern of creation, the dynamic interplay of opposites that generates all life. The sun, radiant and active, represents the masculine principle of will and consciousness. The moon, reflective and receptive, embodies the feminine wisdom of intuition and the unconscious. Their union is not a distant astral event, but an inner alchemy, the reconciliation of duality within the seeker's own being. The Philosopher's Stone emerges from this sacred union, not as a physical object, but as the birth of a higher consciousness, the child of light born from the integration of all that was once divided. Then there is the enigmatic figure of the green lion, a recurring motif in Paracelsian lore. Often depicted devouring the sun, this fierce yet vital creature symbolizes the raw, unrefined power of nature, the primal energy that must be harnessed and transformed in the alchemical work. The lion's green hue connects it to the vegetative soul of the world, the untamed force of growth and decay that precedes all refinement. To confront the green lion is to face the chaotic, instinctual depths of the self, the unbridled passions and shadowy impulses that resist the discipline of the spirit. Yet Paracelsus teaches that this very chaos contains the seeds of transformation. The lion does not merely destroy the sun, but dissolves it so that its essence may be liberated and reborn in a higher form. The alchemist who learns to work with this fierce energy, rather than suppress it, unlocks one of the great secrets, that darkness is not the enemy of light, but its necessary counterpart. Perhaps the most profound of these symbolic narratives is the death and resurrection of the alchemical king. In this drama, the old ruler, representing the outworn modes of thought, the rigid structures of the unawakened self, must first be slain, his body dissolved in the alchemical bath, his crown tarnished and broken. Only through this symbolic death can the new king, radiant and immortal, rise from the ashes. Paracelsus saw this process mirrored everywhere, in the cycles of the seasons, the fermentation of wine, the germination of seeds buried in darkness. The Philosopher's Stone in this light is the product of this eternal cycle of dissolution and renewal, the proof that nothing is truly lost, only transmuted. The seeker who embraces this truth undergoes their own inner crucifixion and rebirth, dying to the limited self to be resurrected in wisdom. These narratives were never meant to be taken as mere stories. They are maps of transformation, coded instructions for navigating the inner landscapes where real alchemy occurs. When Paracelsus speaks of the dragon guarding the treasure, he is not describing a fairy tale beast, but the resistance of the untransformed ego, the fear that bars the way to deeper knowledge. The treasure is consciousness itself, and the dragon is both adversary and initiator, for only by facing it can the seeker claim their birthright. To read these symbols literally is to miss their power. To dismiss them as archaic fantasies is to forfeit their keys. They are the language of the soul, and Paracelsus was its fluent poet. In his world, every substance, every process, every celestial event is a chapter in the great alchemical text of the universe, waiting to be deciphered by those with eyes to see. The brilliance of Paracelsus's teachings lies not in their abstraction, but in their urgent relevance, the way they bridge the mystical and the mundane, offering a path of transformation that reverberates through every facet of human existence. To dismiss his work as mere historical curiosity is to overlook its living pulse, the way it still speaks to those who seek meaning beyond the surface of things. The Philosopher's Stone was never meant to be a relic locked away in some forgotten grimoire. It is an invitation to perceive the world differently, to engage with reality as both scientist and sage. The question then becomes, how does one integrate these ancient truths into the chaos and clamor of modern life? Consider first the alchemical approach to healing, one of Paracelsus's most enduring contributions. Rejecting the rigid dogmas of medieval medicine, he insisted that true healing must address not just the body, but the spirit and the cosmos as interconnected layers of a single reality. His concept of the ens spirituale, the spiritual essence of disease, suggests that illness often begins in the unseen dimensions of a person's being before manifesting in the flesh. In today's terms, we might recognize this as the intimate link between stress, emotional turmoil, and physical ailments. Paracelsus would have seen modern medicine's focus on symptoms rather than root causes as a tragic limitation. His alternative? A holistic approach where the physician serves as both healer and guide, helping the patient realign with the natural rhythms of their own body and the wider universe. This is not mere metaphor. Emerging fields like psychoneuroimmunology now echo his intuition that consciousness and biology are deeply entwined. Then there is the alchemical perspective on personal transformation. The understanding that every life crisis, every moment of suffering or stagnation is an opportunity for inner transmutation. Paracelsus's Solve et Coagula becomes a powerful framework for navigating modern existential challenges. When faced with a shattered career, a broken relationship, or a loss of identity, the alchemical approach is not to frantically rebuild the old structures, but to first allow the dissolution. Like base metal in the crucible, the ego must be broken down before it can be reforged into something more resilient. This is the wisdom behind therapeutic practices that encourage sitting with discomfort rather than fleeing it, the recognition that darkness often precedes dawn. The Philosopher's Stone in this context is the hard-won clarity that emerges when we stop resisting life's natural cycles of death and rebirth. On a societal level, Paracelsus's rebellion against rigid authority offers a provocative lens through which to view contemporary systems of knowledge and power. His infamous burning of medical texts was not an act of anti-intellectualism, but a protest against knowledge that had become disconnected from lived experience. Today, we face a parallel challenge. Institutions that prioritize data over wisdom, algorithms over intuition, and standardized metrics over individual nuance. The Paracelsian response would not be to reject science, but to humanize it, to restore the balance between empirical observation and the deeper, more poetic understanding of nature's intelligence. His teachings remind us that true progress requires both rigor and reverence, a marriage of the analytical mind and the awakened heart. Even the most mundane aspects of daily life can become alchemical when viewed through this lens. The morning ritual of coffee preparation transforms into a meditation on extraction and essence. The act of composting kitchen scraps becomes a participation in nature's eternal cycle of decay and renewal. Paracelsus would urge us to see these ordinary processes as mirrors of greater truths, that every moment holds the potential for either mechanical routine or sacred awareness. The difference lies not in the action itself, but in the consciousness brought to it. Perhaps the most radical practical implication of all is the Paracelsian view of humanity's role in the cosmos. Unlike the modern paradigm that casts humans as either dominators or accidental bystanders in an indifferent universe, alchemy proposes we are active participants in creation's unfolding. Every thought, every choice, every act of creativity or destruction ripples through the web of life in ways seen and unseen. To embrace this perspective is to step into profound responsibility, not as a burden, but as a sacred partnership with the intelligence that sustains all things. The Philosopher's Stone, then, is not an end goal, but a way of being, the realization that we are both the alchemist and the elixir, the seeker and the sought. The journey through Paracelsus's Forbidden Teachings does not conclude. It spirals outward, leaving us at the threshold where all true alchemy begins. The moment when intellectual understanding dissolves into lived experience, when symbols cease to be concepts and become fires that remake the soul. What began as an exploration of historical esoterica reveals itself as something far more immediate, a mirror held up to our deepest yearnings for transformation, wholeness, and participation in the mystery of existence. The Philosopher's Stone was never hidden in distant centuries or locked within cryptic manuscripts. It has been waiting patiently within the very fabric of our awareness, waiting for the scales of ordinary perception to fall away. Paracelsus's greatest secret, the one that made his teachings so dangerous to established powers, was his insistence that divinity resides not in some far-off heaven, but in the messy, glorious act of engaging with creation. The alchemical laboratory was never merely a physical space filled with retorts and alembics. It was the human experience itself, the crucible of relationships, the fermentation of grief and joy, the slow crystallization of wisdom from the solution of daily trials. To seek the stone is to recognize that every moment offers raw prima materia. The argument with a loved one contains the same transformative potential as the alchemist's fire. The quiet walk beneath the stars as much significance as any celestial invocation. The forbidden teaching was simply this: The sacred cannot be quarantined from the ordinary, because the ordinary was always sacred. Yet this realization demands something more unsettling than passive admiration. It calls for a fundamental reorientation of being. Paracelsus did not merely describe alchemy, he embodied it, standing as proof that a human life could burn with the same intensity and purity as the alchemical sun. His example throws down a gauntlet to our modern fragmentation. Can we, too, live as integrated beings, scientists and poets, pragmatists and visionaries? Can we hold the tension between reason and revelation until they birth a new way of knowing? The transformational call echoing through his work is not to adopt archaic practices, but to recover the fearless curiosity and holistic vision that made him a heretic in his time, and might do so again in ours. Consider our current crossroads, a world drowning in information yet starving for wisdom, wielding technological power beyond medieval imagination, yet increasingly disconnected from nature's rhythms. The Paracelsian response would not be a retreat to primitivism, but a radical integration, using the microscope and the telescope to see more deeply into nature's wonders, while never losing sight of the cosmic dance in which they participate. His spirit lives in those who dare to ask not just, how does this work, but why does this matter? Who pursue genetic research with the same reverence he brought to herbalism, who approach artificial intelligence with the ethical depth he applied to homunculi. The stone in this light becomes a symbol for the missing synthesis our civilization craves, the fusion of progress and soul. For the individual seeker, the call is equally urgent. We stand at a unique historical moment when ancient wisdom and modern knowledge could cross-pollinate as never before, if we have the courage to let both transform us. This requires what alchemists called the magnum opus, the great work of self-examination. Where do we cling to intellectual laziness disguised as skepticism? Where do we hide behind spiritual platitudes to avoid hard questions? The alchemical path demands we hold both the rigor of the scientist and the wonder of the mystic, allowing each to purify the other. It asks us to see our personal struggles, our depressions, our addictions, our creative blocks, not as failures, but as the necessary nigredo, the blackening stage where old forms break down so new light can emerge. The most subversive truth Paracelsus offers may be that the philosopher's stone was never meant to be possessed, only to be served. Like the alchemical gold that corrupts those who seek it for greed, but illuminates those who pursue it for wisdom, the stone's ultimate gift is the realization that transformation was never about acquiring something, but becoming someone, a conduit for the archetypal forces that shape worlds. This is why his teachings were forbidden, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well, threatening systems built on separation and control. A society of awakened alchemists cannot be easily governed or manipulated. They recognize too clearly the illusions that pass for reality. Now the call resounds across the centuries. Will we remain content with the base metal of fragmented existence, or dare we enter the fire? Not the literal flames of medieval furnaces, but the living fire of attention, the sustained gaze that sees through appearances to the living intelligence pulsing within all things. The laboratory stands ready, in our kitchens where ingredients become nourishment, in our gardens where decay becomes fertility, in our conversations where words become bridges or barriers. Every choice is an alchemical operation. Will we dissolve our prejudices, coagulate our scattered energies, marry our contradictions? Paracelsus's legacy is not a set of answers, but a burning question. What would it mean to live as if the universe is alive? As if matter is spirit condensed? As if we are not merely observers of mystery, but participants in its unfolding? The stone awaits, not at the end of some distant quest, but here, now, in the way we breathe, the way we meet another's eyes, the way we stand before the unknown. The forbidden teaching was always an invitation to remember our birthright, to walk as sovereigns of the earthly realm and citizens of the stars, fully human yet transparent to the divine. The final transmutation is this, realizing we were the gold all along.